I needed life to be showing me through my successes and my performance that I was a good person. This failure meant that I was no longer a good person, because I'd failed at something. Like, I'd stood at the altar and made a promise till death do us part, and I'd broken that promise, and that's kind of how it felt. It felt so big. Like, I'm getting emotional now thinking about it because of how it felt to me at the time. Like, it felt like I had just failed, and I couldn't string life together after that. Like, that one unraveling it, I still had my job. Money was still coming in the door. I still owned a lot of things. None of it mattered because I had no idea how to deal with this, this traumatic loss, this grief. And unfortunately, I told everyone I was fine.
Hello, beautiful people. On today's podcast, we have the beautiful Dan Price. Dan is a passionate change maker, storyteller, and educator in the mental health, suicide prevention, and wellness space. He is a proud ambassador for Movember and Are You OK Day. Fundraising for Movember and spreading awareness, Dan ran his first ultramarathon of 60 kilometers in 2019, 126.6 kilometers in 2020, and in 2021 created the Project 205. Now also an ambassador for Lululemon, which we will discuss deeply in this conversation. I will preface this with saying that this podcast has a trigger warning as we cover topics on mental health and suicide. If anyone needs to seek mental health support, please call the numbers I have provided below. What I personally love about this conversation is Dan's powerful vulnerability and storytelling. I was so deeply captivated by Dan sharing his story of real hardship, the type of hardship that essentially led him, in 2014, to standing on the edge of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, wanting to take his own life. I have no doubt that most of us, if not all, have experienced some form of mental health challenge in our life. But there is certainly something so deep in the idea of, as Dan shares, being in this state that rationalizing to yourself to no longer be here feels like the right thing to do. Dan's story is really emotive. It moves you, both through having the opportunity to see yourself throughout his story, but to also have deep empathy, one human to another. As a friend of Dan's, I've always seen him as a phoenix rising from the ashes. The way in which he has recentered himself, how he's learned to love himself, and as a byproduct of this, how he has learned to forgive himself. A masterful suicide prevention and mental health speaker and ambassador, he's truly saving people's lives through sharing his story. Please enjoy this conversation around mental health and Dan's most recent project, Project 205. Welcome to the To Be Human podcast, Dan.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenna. It's a privilege to be here. I'm really excited.
I am just so excited to have this conversation with you, Dan. Anytime that you and I start a conversation, I feel like we're kind of the people that could talk for days. So I'm just so happy to get into it. And where I wanted to start with you, Dan, is I was listening to a podcast recently, a former conversation that you had, and you were talking about your younger years. And you said, everyone wanted me to be on their team, but no one wanted to be friends with me in the classroom. And as someone that was listening to that, that made a huge impact on me because it made me kind of reflect. And, I understand this, but it's like when you hear sentences like this, you really do understand how childhood experiences can affect that trajectory of your life. So I'd love to kind of start with you about learning more about your younger years and how that sort of experience came to form sort of your future years.
Yeah, even hearing you recite that sentence sort of gave me all the feels. I had an amazing childhood, but it was challenging. And I think, growing up, is hard for a lot of kids. I didn't feel like I fit in. From the moment I can remember, I just felt like a bit of a misfit. And, that was then exacerbated by being diagnosed with ADHD at 7, and medicated for that mental illness by definition. I really struggled with concentration on anything that I wasn't really, really excited and passionate about. I wasn't a poor learner. Like, I wasn't learning challenged. So I still got decent grades and understood all the concepts. I just didn't enjoy being in the classroom. Had huge amounts of energy, and I'm an outdoors person by nature. And I started playing sport at a very young age. My dad was pretty sporty, played high level cricket and tennis. I kind of walked in his footsteps, although cricket was a bit slow for me. But I played a lot of soccer and tennis, but also, all sorts of sports under the sun: baseball, trampolining, gymnastics. I did springboard diving, netball, water polo. I just played I was just into everything, and was just naturally gifted. The challenge was, as you mentioned in that sentence about the divide I was feeling at a very young age, I almost felt like there was two people within me. I didn't have borderline personality disorder or anything like that, but the way I was accepted in the world in two very obvious areas of my life. But at that stage, I kind of felt like there were sort of two big parts of my life. There was like school in the classroom, where I was really challenged and not very accepted, and very heavily, what's the word? Anyway, I was kind of punished a lot and reprimanded, I guess, for my behavior, and sort of, they tried to put me in a box. You can't talk, you can't fidget with your pen, you can't do this. And it was always, you can't stop. And then on the sports field, it was like free reign, do your thing, be you, Right. So I could be the full expression of who I was as a child was out there, and I got that freedom. And then it's like I came back in the classroom, and it felt like a cage. And I couldn't really play by the rules properly. I really struggled. And so kids didn't want to sit next to me. I had parents in the playground ask me not to sit next to their kids in class because I was getting their kids in trouble. The way the education system was, it was hard. Like, I'm 7, 8, 9 years old, having parents come up to me and say, "Can you not talk to my child?" Wow. But the child then, their child then wants me on their sports team every time. I was the first one picked for any sport. And it was really tough. And like you said, childhood experiences really shape us. That was somewhat of a trauma. That was like a real emotional, traumatic experience for me, like an extended one, not an isolated incident. But, in my therapy, it's been uncovered as the trigger point for what I call my identity crisis, where I just wasn't really sure who I was. And it really did shape me in the sense that I never really was able to work through that because I didn't speak about it. I wasn't open about it. I also had, unfortunately, this pretty toxic behavior, certainly unhelpful behavior of burying my emotions and trying to fix it on my own since I was very young. I think, again, that's just a societal thing, growing up in the 80s and, 90s as a kid. Come from a farming background, country people. My dad's 6'5", he's a big bloke. All of those things played into the fact that I just needed to be a man as a young boy, like a rite of passage to be tough and strong. And, I think my sporting prowess kind of solidified that. Like, I'm strong and tough, and I win, and I tackle hard, and, and I get knocked out every now and again, and it's good. And, it was that whole thing, the bravado and the need to win. But it was from probably an unhelpful basis that I needed to be the best, to know that I was good enough. And that theme then flowed through my entire adult life until, my crisis point as a sort of 29-year-old man. I just buried my emotions. I escaped them. I didn't want to feel them. I needed to be the best at everything. I became very obsessive with perfection. I had a lot of OCD tendencies, really, really meticulous about everything, the order of my desk, the folding of my clothes, the cleanliness of my space. Everything just had to be perfect, because I thought that if I did that, then I was a good person. It was bizarre. Like, even when people would come over to my house, I wanted them to comment on how organized and clean my house was, because that was a tick of approval for me. And that's a small one, but it's really important for me to recognize that through my therapy, to let go of it, because it was creating a lot of stress and anxiety without realizing, subconsciously. And that was performance for me. I was performing. Right. Like, it wasn't actually, we talk about human performance and high performance, but I was also being a performer. Like, I was acting. I was not being, I didn't know I was. I thought I was being me, but I didn't know what was me. And my life was an act for accolades, an act for external gratification, an act for applause. My performance was, it was all about, when I as a young person was accepted and applauded for scoring tries and getting goals and being, winning all the sports carnivals, that feeling lit me up and made me feel like I was good enough and feel connected to people. So I just chased that like a drug, the dopamine and serotonin and everything that comes with that. Especially as a child that struggles with ADHD, like neurologically and, in terms of brain chemistry that I've really studied just because I'm intrigued by it, it makes absolute perfect sense why I became quite addicted to external gratification. And it's just, and I still struggle with it now, as I'm sure we're going to talk about today. Like, the things that I do today, I need to make sure that they're coming from the right place for me, right, and that it's not me slipping back into old behavioral patterns of needing to feel like I'm achieving all the time to feel good enough as a human being. And that just comes back to sitting with who I am, slowing down and taking stock of what I've got going on in my life and what is my why. What is the real essence of why I am doing something, anything? And as long as it's aligned with my purpose, my beliefs and my values, it's a tick for me. If there's always going to be some ego there. Right. There's always going to be some, and for me, obviously, I believe ego is a very powerful, positive thing that can, if you don't have a good relationship with it, like of awareness and real understanding of how you interact with your ego, then it can be detrimental, I feel, certainly for me personally. Obviously, it can rule me a bit. It has in the past through, chasing external gratification and materialistic things really was my downfall through my 20s in particular. So that's a long answer to that opener, but like I feel like there's so much in there for me, because you chose a sentence that really shaped my entire life. Like that's the catalyst for my struggles. If I had not had that struggle, if I had felt accepted and good enough, just as I was as a young boy, even with the diagnosis, I think my trajectory in my adolescence and into my early adult life would have been completely different. The choices I made about relationships, how I allowed people to treat me, like it was all founded upon that struggle as a 7-year-old.
Yeah, I think so many of us, particularly us achievers, can relate to that, of being so young and reinforced by our sense of achievement. And it filters into your life. I know, for me personally, I've shared this story before, but I studied law and politics for almost 6 years because I really enjoyed the way that people responded to the idea of me studying that. I felt, as you're saying, I felt enough. I felt like people respected me more because of it. But obviously that was only a reflection of, what I'd learned being young, that like I had to do to be, not be as a human being, that I am enough. And I'd love to know, Dan, because I know that this was so powerful in your life as you go into your 20s. This starts to manifest in your career and the way that you show up in your work. And, you know, you mentioned about that earlier sense of an identity crisis, even when you're a kid, that it starts to kind of become larger in your 20s and it starts to sort of have its own evolution of your own experience. How does this sort of play out for you as an adult?
Yeah. It played out in some really interesting ways. Again, that have only come to light in the last sort of 5 or 6 years of doing some, you know, pretty deep therapy and consistent therapy. Firstly, it played out in my choice of university degree, similar to yourself. You know, I was following in Dad's footsteps in a way. Certainly, I think my ultimate goal around being a young adult, say 17, 18, 19, was to make Dad proud. Like, that's kind of what I felt the most. I looked up to him. He was a godlike figure to me. You know, he was a successful businessman, very present and loving father, but a very, very hard worker. And I wanted to make him proud. And, you know, there were some significant conversations that we had around, you know, my studying habits and performance, where Dad didn't think I was quite working hard enough. And I really took those to heart. Like, I remember them so clearly because of the way they made me feel. And I was like, well, you know, I need to make Dad proud, so I'm going to work harder. You know, that certainly wasn't his intention. He was just parenting me the way he knew how. And anyway, yeah, so it shaped pretty much all of my decisions, really. You know, I didn't really want to do business and property economics at uni. You know, I had PE and you know, those sorts of sciencey performance, physical performance related type things I wanted to pursue. And you'll see, you know, well, you know now that I'm pursuing those in other ways, you know, in terms of passions now, but it came out much later. But, you know, I had to get the scholarship. There was one scholarship in my university class to work at a big property firm when I was in my third semester. So I worked as hard as I possibly could. I didn't quite have the grades. I didn't have a HD average, but I was close enough, and I just did everything I needed to do. I went above and beyond. I met the people I needed to meet. I sought them out. I used my network. I used my dad's network. I got in front of the right people, and I got this scholarship. So, you know, I'm a 20-year-old full-time uni student working at an international property firm 3 days a week. Huge workload. You know, I'll work an extra 2 days. Oh, you want me for one? I can do 3. You know, and it's just this whole, you know, just piling stuff on and proving to everyone that I'm good enough and that I can do more work than other people. You know, and for me, what that did was it made my life very stressful, because I had a lot on my plate and I had to do everything perfectly. So I'd be cramming and studying, you know, and I did fail one class, which was like horrendous, but I had too much on my plate. You know, if I wasn't working 3 days a week while I was being at uni, then that wouldn't have happened, but I had no time. But, you know, like I was just really rushing life in terms of, I just wanted to get out and work. I got a job to work at that firm full time before I finished uni, which, you know, again, everyone's just like, oh, damn, you know, the child prodigy, you're amazing, you know, and it just made me feel so good.
Yeah.
I'm like, Dad's so proud of me, you know, like family celebration dinners about the fact that I got this job and it's all big. It's amazing. But at the same time, they didn't realize, nor did I, that it was just so misplaced in terms of, I just didn't know who I was. I was just kind of on autopilot. This is what I'm supposed to do. That whole doing versus being thing. I was never a human being. Like, I was just a human doing, doing, you know, at a rapid rate. And I was extremely successful. You know, my mates were looking up to me. Pricey, look at you. You know, they're all at Oktoberfest drinking pints, and I've started my career. You know, I'm 21. I've graduated from uni. I've got a full-time job. I'm in a suit, working in the big smoke in the city, you know, on level 45 of this office tower. I'm a baby. I'm also in a relationship with my high school sweetheart, doing, again, what I think is right. And then at 21, you know, we've been together 4 years. People start asking, "Well, are you going to get married?"
Right.
Oh, that's what's next. Okay. Propose to my girlfriend. get married at 23. Like, I'm still a baby, buy a house. Like, looking back now, it's ridiculous because I know how I was then, and I didn't know anything about life. I was just tunnel vision. And again, like, what you were saying about the way people made you feel and how that felt to you when, people were like, you're amazing, Jennah, you're studying law and you're such this amazing person, you're such this high performer, you got this amazing shiny degree. And it is amazing. There's nothing bad about that, but it's what was driving it. And obviously there's some similarities between the intention of why you were doing what you're doing and why I was. Like, was it for me? Is it what I really wanted to do? No. It wasn't, but I had no idea what that was. And I'd never sat with that. And I have no idea if I'd sat with that at 23, 24 years old, I don't know if it would have changed anything. It's so hard to know. Certainly would have shifted the way I went about my life from that point, I think. But my career was everything. I cancelled and skipped out on holidays because I didn't want to lose certain deals. I was on a commission-based role. So it was all about money. Really changed the way I thought about life. I was really just rewired to think about money, and money was the reward, because that's how performance was measured in my career. We had targets and quotas, and you almost feel like a number. Your boss is always checking in on you, how far off your targets you are. And it's so funny that, looking back now, I was chasing these promotions, which, I got promoted 3 times in the first 4 years, was the youngest associate director at this firm at the time ever. And it was just crazy. I was performing well, but I was working hard. And I just look back now and see that every time I got promoted, I just got a bigger target. Like, it wasn't really a reward. It's like, well done, you're now an associate director and you need to earn X for us now. This is your new target. And, I've got a lot of thoughts on how that just is not great for a human being, to be chasing money like that. I don't know how those corporations would restructure the way they do business, but I've gone to speak at my old firm, which I worked at nine and a half years. I worked there in the end. Made it through some really tough times, but in the end, it just wasn't working for me anymore. And I'm glad that, as listeners probably don't, my relationship ended up falling apart. We were growing separate ways, and I think that was the catalyst for me to really realize that my life isn't what I thought it was. I think. It was the first time I'd experienced significant, stress that I just could not deal with on my own, although I tried to, unfortunately. And, because I had everything I thought I needed to be happy. I had sports cars, I had a property in Sydney, I had the girl, we're going on nice holidays, had all this stuff. And I kind of feel like I sort of climbed this more so metaphorical ladder, but I kind of got up to this level where I could see that I was only a couple of rungs from the top, and if I kept going, I probably would have one day run that team, maybe been one of the most senior people at this firm. That's kind of the trajectory I was on. Very well liked in the business and that sort of thing. And I remember looking around at the other, mainly men that were around me. It was a really male dominated industry and team. And I just didn't really like what I saw. And I think that was around the time when my relationship was starting to struggle. We were in marriage counseling, at 28 years old, I'm in marriage counseling, trying to fix my marriage. And life was just unraveling pretty quickly, I think. And became really hard to recalibrate, all the things that were making me feel good enough and feel happy just weren't anymore, almost overnight. And I had no idea what was going on. And I was, just really at a loss as to yeah, how to fix it, I guess.
And obviously, this is such a turning point for you as things begin to unravel. And, if you're comfortable, I'd love for you to sort of share that story of sort of, the point that you get to and the reflections that you make being in a situation like that, where you feel like what you've been seeking for so long sort of no longer gives you that feeling of, you did yourself, quote unquote, happiness.
Yeah.
And it's like there's a loss there, but there's also not anything to grab onto. I'd love for you to sort of share more of that moment in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so big, it is the turning point of my life, but in a really, I don't do things by halves, I guess people always say. Like, it was very, quite dramatic downfall, I guess you'd call it, or unraveling, which I now see as obviously perfectly beautiful, and I'm very grateful for it, but it's taken me a long time to get there. So I ended up separating from my wife and moving out of my home back here where I actually am today, funnily enough, in my parents' house. I've been bouncing around Sydney between meetings and things, so I've landed here for this podcast. So I moved back with my parents for the first time since I was 20. And I remember sitting in this room sort of next door to where I am now, just really wondering how my life had fallen apart, is how it felt. And all that had happened, well, I say all, it's significant, but the only change was that my relationship was ending. And there was really, by that point, we knew we were getting divorced. There was no, we tried. I was, completely out of that relationship. There was no fixing it in my eyes, but it was really hard for me, even though I was the one that left in the end. I felt like a complete failure, is the point. I felt completely responsible. I felt like a bad person for even marrying her. I felt like I'd wasted her time. There were all these really huge feelings that I just didn't know what to do with. And because I needed to be a good person, I needed life to be showing me through my successes and my performance that I was a good person. This failure meant that I was no longer a good person, because I'd failed at something. Like, I'd stood at the altar and made a promise till death do us part, and I'd broken that promise, and that's kind of how it felt. It felt so big. Like, I'm getting emotional now thinking about it because of how it felt to me at the time. Like, it felt like I had just failed, and I just couldn't string life together after that. Like, that one unraveling it, I still had my job. Money was still coming in the door. I still owned a lot of things. None of it mattered because I had no idea how to deal with this, this traumatic loss, this grief. And unfortunately, I told everyone I was fine. I just put on that mask. I put, and I put on my suit to work every day, which was kind of like this dress up. It was almost like a costume. The suit was on, the tie was on, fancy cufflinks, the shiny shoes, did my hair. And it was like this process of getting ready in the morning became this act that was painful to put on. I used to cry putting on my suit in the morning, not knowing how I was going to fake the day. Like, I was quite aware. It's strange. It was subconscious for a long time, and then it became quite conscious that I was faking it. But again, I just didn't really know how to get out of it. I didn't seek any help. I didn't tell anyone by this point how depressed I was feeling. I really hated who I was because I felt like a failure. I was then, by this stage, because of how poor my mental state was, my performance was dropping off a cliff at a rapid rate. I was experiencing immense performance anxiety to the point of my anxiety became so all-consuming. I was having full body sweats, running to the bathroom at work and vomiting, leaving meetings in panic attacks. And I didn't join the dots that this was mental health related because I didn't really have any education on what mental health was, which is, again, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about talking about this stuff now, because, you know, my whole schooling, through boarding school, through uni, and my career by this point, which was probably about 8 years, I'd never had a mental health session where, you know, people talk about the warning signs, what it is, how to join the dots. I didn't even know that my ADHD was a mental illness. You know, like I just didn't know. So I didn't, and that meant that I didn't know how much help was out there. I didn't know that, you know, you could really ask for help and that was what you were supposed to do. I just thought, you know, I'm a bloke, I can fix this on my own. So I kept trying to fix it, and it was way past fixing it on your own, like way past. And so I was just in a really, what's the word? You know, it's such a big feeling that I'm feeling right now, reflecting on it. You know, a really lonely downward spiral, I guess. You know, it was very, very intense at times. I turned to substance abuse, alcohol, recreational drugs, sleeping tablets to try and numb myself after not really being a drinker or partier. That didn't work, of course, made things worse. Probably momentarily made them better because I was just numb for a little while. Until, you know, I was doing that too many times a week. Right. You know, it became socially acceptable, or Dan's just blowing off some steam, he's gone through a divorce, to me hiding it and doing it behind closed doors because I didn't know how to turn off my brain and deal with my anxiety and depression without numbing myself completely. And it became really messy through 2014. This was by this stage, after separating in towards probably around October of 2013, just to timestamp it. So I'd had most of 2014 feeling quite depressed, and it progressed to the point where I had these mini burnouts and I'd feel a little bit better, and then I'd fall in a heap and I'd have a few days off work, and that kind of cycle continued every probably 4 to 6 weeks. And I was just on this burnout cycle, still not seeking help until probably through the toxic behaviors, or, you know, the substance abuse and just not seeking help. It got to the point where it was completely unmanageable. I was just, you know, a shell of a human, really, like really broken. You know, the depression was kind of like poison running through my brains. It'd get through my veins. It had completely taken over my brain, to the point where I don't recall ever having a positive thought for a very long time. I completely hated who I was, and all my thoughts were negative. You know, and I believe that is what happens to a lot of people who suffer really chronic depression for a long time. If you don't seek help and you don't catch it, your mind just completely turns against you, and then you believe that the thoughts are so loud, and they're so intense, and they're really nasty. And you hear them for long enough and you just start believing them to be true. And it's the really sad thing. You know, I started to become suicidal. I started feeling like that was the right decision because I was a burden on my friends and family. And I remember thinking things like, oh, well, I had sort of 27, 28 good years, and, you know, good in inverted commas again, you know, but right. I feel like I'd done well, you know, I'd achieved everything, and maybe it was my time. Like maybe, you know, I only had a short life. Like I was having these thoughts and they were making sense to me. I was like, well, you know, like people die young. Like maybe it's just, that's it for me. That's really sad looking back. Like this is the conversation. This is the dialogue in my head. You know, but bargaining and agreeing with the fact that it was, you know, quite a realistic idea to take my own life. And yeah, on the 4th of December, 2014, after, you know, as you know, a really long battle with depression without seeking help, I tried to take my life that morning by, climbing up on the Harbour Bridge at sunrise because I couldn't face another day of work. It was a Thursday morning, after sleeping in my car that night, which I was doing fairly regularly through the shame and guilt that I was feeling, social isolation. Just I was really crippled by my mental illness by that point, and I was very, very lucky to be spotted by someone and rescued by emergency services that morning. And yeah, and that started, my path of healing from those, all of those experiences, including the trauma of trying to take your life and needing to be rescued. It was it was a really big period in my life, but as I said, like a really, really beautiful one, because to go through such a transformative life experience to hit, as what they call rock bottom, in pretty dramatic fashion, at 29, it's got me to where I am today at 36. And, my life in the last few years in particular has just become so full. And, I just think that's amazing. And like, I would go through it again because I survived. It was painful, but it was so transformative. And the lessons that I learned, I know a lot of people never get the opportunity to learn and live through life doing, not being, as I know you say. And that shift allowed me to, over time understand that, life is all about experiences and connection and love and how we feel. And that all comes from within first. So really my healing journey was, a few years of learning to forgive myself. It was a journey of acceptance and a journey of, understanding who I am, and then forming a relationship with myself, which I never had. And it's taken a very long time to be able to say I'm proud of who I am today, and I love who I am today, and I accept myself with all my, beautiful imperfections, like I say, which I stole from a book, and I know it's not a unique statement, but I really believe it to be true, that we're all perfectly imperfect, and the sooner a human being accepts that, the sooner they're free, I feel.
I absolutely agree. And thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so raw and vulnerable and powerful. And I know it has such a positive impact in this world. So thank you so much. And I know, Dan, that, you speak of forgiveness. And I think this is just so important, because I think when we get into these darker spaces, and obviously there's a spectrum, but I think it can be really difficult for us to come back from that space in terms of forgiveness. We can hit so low and do things, as you were saying, we can self-medicate, or we can, get into toxic relationships, or however it manifests. It can sometimes be more difficult coming out of these more darker times because we have so much baggage that comes with us, or we feel like there's so much baggage. And, I know that you've obviously moved into the beautiful space of ultra running, which I just absolutely love. And I know that has been such a big part of your healing process as well. And something that, really warmed my heart was seeing you run 3 marathons in a row called the Long Run. And there's a beautiful, powerful picture. And I genuinely recommend to anyone listening that you go and see this picture in Dan's social media, because it's powerful. And, it's of you standing on that bridge and, you sharing with us that it was a moment in which you forgave yourself and you chose to let go. And I'd love for you to share more about that moment, because I think that is such an important aspect of being able to move forward and become more of who you are.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's okay.
I think just hearing someone else talk about it, like I don't hear people talk about those experiences from their perspective. It just makes it feel really real and tangible, I guess. That day was so special. It was really, I called it, like I said to my partner, Sarah, that it was like, that felt like a pilgrimage for me. I needed to, I had my own intentions outside of, running for men's mental health and suicide prevention that day, that I thought I'd forgiven myself multiple times, I guess is the point, Jennah. I hadn't. There was still yeah, a lack of forgiveness there. And when it would come up when if I'd done something else that I felt, and, I'm still very hard on myself. I just get to it quicker,
Right.
And I still push hard, and I feel that old behavior and that old self come up. It's still there. That wounded child that people speak of is still there. And he goes, you could have done better there. And when I used to, in the last few years before this particular day, when I used to experience those times where I was hard on myself, this feeling of unforgiveness would come up through this experience of trying to take my life. And I'd done so much CBT work and all this trauma healing and, everything under the sun. And I just wasn't quite sure. Like I used to tell people that I'd healed from it. I used to stand on stage and tell them that I'd grown and I'd healed and I'd forgiven myself. And it was only true to a point, because there was still something in there and I wasn't sure how to let it go. And I was like, maybe it needs to be symbolic. Maybe there needs to be some sort of ceremony. And for me, I was like, well, running, as you know, is just such a spiritual experience, and running 3 marathons back to back in one day, I was going to learn so much about myself. And yeah, so I really wanted to try something new, I guess was the point. I wasn't sure whether it was going to work, but I really just wanted to. I had a journal entry that I'd written when I'd gone back into a mental health clinic in 2019 for a little tune-up, as I call it. I went back on mental health medication at that time because I wasn't coping with the grief of losing a little baby in a miscarriage. Looked after Sarah, not myself, and slipped into those old patterns, and that kind of brought up a lot of trauma. So anyway, I went back and had this tune-up, and a journal entry from that stay in hospital was a recognition that I needed to forgive myself. And I would reflect on my journals from time to time, and this piece spoke to me. So I tore the page out and I put it in the back of my phone, and I said, when I cross the bridge and I'm a half marathon from finishing this absolute beast of an ultramarathon, going from 60 Ks being my previous longest run up to 126.6, doubling that distance. There was so much in it, and I knew I could do it. And a big part of the drive for me personally was to just get there knowing that I was home. Like I can walk a half marathon. Like we ended up running it, but I knew I was home, and the symbolism of crossing that bridge to get home to my partner and my kids was just really powerful. And yeah, so I stood there on the bridge and I recited this journal entry, which was asking me to forgive myself and that it was okay. And I think I've shared the words recently. People used to ask what was on the, and at first I felt like it was quite private. It was nothing amazing. It was no amazing piece of poetry. It was just be you now, Dan, You are not the guy that survived suicide. You are you. Don't let it define who you are. It's part of your past. You can let it go. It's not your fault, And when I read that, like, it just washed over me. And, I was standing at the place where I was ready to take my life. And it was just very, very significant and powerful, as you said, that photo, which, I didn't know was being taken either. It was just, everything was just so, that day was just so powerful. And, that was, where I really was able to let go. I haven't felt any shame or negative self-talk about that experience of trying to take my life since that day.
Wow.
And I think it was just, it needed to be, I needed to do something experiential. For me, that was a ceremony. And I had toyed with the idea of, do I create some sort of letting go ceremony? Like a lot of people do that, like the burn book or whatever it is. Ceremony is so powerful in human history. So many cultures still have a lot of deep ceremony within the way they do life and the transitional periods of life, which I'm intrigued by. So I, created my own. My running partner, Lockie, knew what I was doing. He supported me through it, gave me a big hug. The other people that were running were kind of peripherally aware of what was going on and sat there and waited for me. And, it was just, I felt a million times lighter. And it was beautiful. It was like I was 95% there, but that other 5% was everything. In terms of that final piece of forgiveness and letting go. And and then when I finished that final half marathon after that, which was really hard because we were really exhausted. We've been running for a long time, and
that's fair.
And then I proposed to my partner at the end of that run, which I felt was really significant, and kind of felt like I needed to let go and forgive myself for that, because I didn't want to keep carrying that around as, and bring that into our new chapter of our life. It kind of felt like I just wanted to free myself of that to show up as a fuller expression of myself, I guess. And it was beautiful. My kids were there. We've got a now 1 and a 3-year-old, but Sonny would have only been a couple of months old. That was November last year. And yeah, it's just really powerful. And I think a lesson to people that, healing from traumatic experiences and letting go, and processing grief comes in many forms and has many phases. It took me 6 years to get to that point. Right on 6 years. And, I kind of thought I'd healed from it 2 years before that. And, I had partially, but not fully. And that's not to say that maybe it won't come back either. Like I won't be angry or disappointed if this traumatic experience comes back and affects me, or something happens. I'm just going, life does what it does. But right now, I've been able to find a place of peace, and it's just, I'm really glad that I was able to do that.
Yeah, I think you bring up such an important point when we do particularly do these sort of forgiveness rituals, to be able to leave some space for it to sort of ebb and flow. It may sort of pop up in a couple of years, and that's totally okay. There's something that's, felt safe enough to release from you, and you just got to be open to further releasing that. And I think it's, just so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so Dan, we are here for part 2 of our conversation. Dan and I love a chat, and we went way over time last time. So I decided that I'd love to give Project 205 the time and respect that it deserves in this conversation. So we've decided to come back together, and I think we should just dive straight into it, Dan. And I'd love for you to share, what is Project 205? And I think more importantly, why did you create something like this and participate in it?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me back. So Project 205 came about because I've been, for the last few years, supporting Movember, Men's Mental Health and Suicide Prevention, as an ambassador, and discovered that I enjoyed distance running. As a youngster, I didn't. I used to find it very boring, and it's not a new formula, I guess, to do endurance events in any type of sport for a cause. It just works. But for me, running is an expression of who I am. It's a language. It really allows me to communicate in ways that I can't say, it's just this different language. There's obviously a lot of non-verbal communication that goes on, and I feel like running for me is like another language. It's just how it feels, and I really connect with a lot of people in that way, because I run for a cause. I run for a reason. I don't run to win. I don't run to break records, which is also really good for me, because I was a really, really highly competitive athlete since I was a young kid, and I had to win everything. So that's been a nice transition as well. But Project 205, I guess, was an evolution of the last few years of my running for Movember. Did my first marathon and ultra marathon 2 or 3 years ago now in the one run. So I decided for my furthest run at that time was half marathon. And that went really well. And then we built on that last year. My good friend Lockie and I decided to try and run a triple marathon. And we ended up getting that done with a lot of difficulty the first run. So we got heat affected. We just unluckily got the hottest November day in about 60 years. That day it was 43 degrees. So we ended up, due to health reasons, stopping after 2 marathons because we had 5 runners left and people were going to get sick. Someone was going to end up in hospital. We were really pushing the boundaries. That day it was much hotter on the road. And then we ran that. Lockie and I went and ran that 5 days later just to make sure we could actually do it. So we ended up running 5 marathons in 6 days, which is wild. And we couldn't believe it, and that was all about this community connecting, getting together around a cause. And because this running for Movember was something that I was really looking forward to every year, it was giving me a lot of direction and purpose and something to train for, where I don't really love running races. Like I do enjoy running ultra marathon races, but they're expensive for starters. I don't really want to compete. So I thought, well, I love trail running more so than road running, and the last 2 runs were road runs. So I wanted to bring trail running to my road running mates and make it accessible for them, to give them an opportunity to maybe experience the community behind it. Everyone talks of how incredible the ultra running or trail running community is. Not to say that the road running community isn't, but road running is generally very, very highly competitive. Whereas I think a lot of people that trail run for the experience, for getting out in nature, camaraderie. It feels like a more of a team sport, in my experience. And I know I share that experience with a lot of other people. I think you can relate to that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so Project 205 was really an extension of my work in the suicide prevention and men's mental health space over the last few years. Probably a culmination, really. I'm not sure where I'm going to go from here. So it's really special too, because I just keep kilometers onto the distance of these runs. It's unsustainable, I think, for me personally. People do run longer. You and I both know there are people out there that do 200, 300-mile races, in one sitting, but, you end up sleeping and it becomes quite an expedition. It's almost like a multi-day in the end. I was really interested in, I guess, the goals of the project. To go back and kind of summarize, the goals of the project were, first and foremost, to share my story on a bigger scale. So with the help of Movember and Lululemon, we created a video of my backstory, which was really powerful and it impacted a lot of people. And that front-ended the run. Yeah, it was beautiful. Maybe, you can link to that
Absolutely.
in the notes so people can see it. But, that was the real goal and driver of the project, was to positively impact people around education in mental health, but also giving people who are struggling and suffering with any mental illness right now hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel. To show people that, I think I say in that film, I want to show people that there's a lot of life to be lived on the other side of mental illness and mental health crisis, because I'm living proof that there is. And that's why I feel like my story is a gift. That's why I'm grateful for my experience and I wouldn't change it. And so that was the real purpose behind the project. But when you tell people that you're running 205 kilometers, people ask why. That's why I did it. Right. I wanted something that was big enough that it was scary for me, because then it really meant something. And if it was scary enough, if the goal was scary enough for me, I knew that it would be big enough to get people's attention. And it did. People turn their heads. I've been having conversations in the shops and someone turns around and says, "What did you just say? You're trying to run 205 kilometers." Like, people actually overhear you saying it and turn and say, "What are you doing?" Yeah. And I had a vehicle that Ford donated for the run, which I had sign written, and people would come up to me and ask me about what was going on. So it was just a conversation starter. And you know, it was really me just making noise for men's mental health, you know, in particular. Like, you know, you make enough noise, people look, you know, shining a light on the issues at hand. And you know, then it became a conversation piece from there. And obviously, outside of that, a personal challenge for myself, you know, I'm kind of, the last few years, I've been really finding myself like pondering on human beings more generally, in terms of, you know, what we're capable of. But I'm really, I would say that in my meditations and my reflections, like it's a theme that runs through my psychology sessions. I'm really curious about my potential as a human being, and not just in achieving great things, but in terms of how much impact I can make. Like, you know, I want to leave a legacy of sorts. You know, I want just not so people talk about me when I'm gone, really, but just so I know that I've left a mark, a positive mark. And right now, the way I know how to do that is to set big goals that scare me. And run for this cause, and hopefully along the way, you know, inspire people to make positive changes in their life. You know, show dads in particular that just because you have kids doesn't mean that you can't do anything for yourself. You know, running ultramarathons all year round is not conducive to work life or family life balance. You know, and I made a lot of sacrifices. My partner, you know, pulled a lot of weight for me to get out and train. And, you know, all of this stuff needs to be discussed. It's not something that you can do forever, all year round. Well, not for me anyway, but there were sacrifices worth making for the cause. And I think the impact that we made, you know, it's really tangible. So to an extent, it's unquantifiable because, you know, that ripple effect, you know, I know people have told me that it's helped their brother or their sister or themselves, but then they go away and have conversations. And I've had people tell me they've started their own, you know, run group in their community, and they're hiking now, or they've gone to see a psychologist for the first time. And that's the stuff that really makes this worthwhile. And then it in the end, you know, it's not really about running. And it becomes less and less about running, even for me, even though I'm the running, because, you know, as I said to a few people before I set off on this adventure, you know, only like, what was it, 8 or 9 days ago now, I started the run. You know, I said to them, like, I've got to remember that we've already won here. Like, we achieved our goals before the run even started. And that shows that it wasn't really about running. Like, I think, that was really beautiful for me to know that, the underlying goal was to move people. And in the end, I didn't actually have to do the run to do that.
Right.
They were already inspired just by the fact that I'd set this goal and I'd trained for it for 4 or 5 months of my life, you know? So it was just a really, really incredible few months, like setting this up and doing all the work on the project. You know, all the interviews and things that go with that to get the message out there. You know, again, like when you make enough noise, people want to talk to you, and, you know, radio and news and people like yourself getting me on amazing podcasts. Like, this is what it's all about, to share it with new audiences. So that's kind of it. Like Project 205, it's not simple, like it's multifaceted, and and it was really, really good fun.
I really want to dive into this like multifaceted side of it. And I would love for you to take us to the run, because as you're sharing, not only is it the biggest goal that you've set yourself, like it's a goal that, as you're sharing, it's scary, it's fear inducing, it's a big goal, but it's also, there's such a mission aspect behind it and a beautiful reason as to why you're doing it. And I feel like with that combination, where you're doing the hardest thing you've ever attempted with such a powerful cause, that's obviously pretty emotion sort of fueling in an experience like that. So I'd love for you to sort of take us to that experience and sort of, you know, your experience of it, and sort of maybe the ebbs and flows of your emotions and mindset out there.
Yeah, for sure. yeah, ultra marathons really are a journey. They're like a very intense version of life for me anyway. Like, you get so many ups and downs. You're going to be tested. I think I learned from the 100K I did, the race you did in the Blue Mountains in May, which was kind of like my test training run to make sure my body was up for it. And I learned there that, things don't go to plan. You can plan as much as you can plan your nutrition and gear as much as you want, but so you could, for example, execute a textbook race. The weather's out and it always is, and you can end up under calories or dehydrated or with blisters because your feet are much wetter than you expected or whatever it might be. So I went into this with a really open mind, and with a lot of acceptance and an intention to let go as often as possible, like not to hold on to things. And I was tested before I even got there. Like my Thursday, the run started on Friday. It was supposed to start at 4 a.m. I ended up actually doing a final recce of one of the aid station stops up high in the mountains on the Thursday, and I got the car bogged, and I ended up stuck out in the mountains without food, without phone reception for like 6 hours. So I was devastated, right? I not only didn't then have the crew car that we were supposed to have because it was literally stuck, and I had to get someone to come and drive out and get me and bring me back. I didn't get Nest until 8:30 p.m. Hadn't eaten, hadn't done any of my food prep. I hadn't rested. And I was supposed to get up at 2:30 to run, and it was a disaster, but it was fine. I didn't freak out. I let it go. We adjusted the start time, and that was hard because it was going to then have a start times who were pacing me, but we worked it out. We worked it up and we were good to go. But you want to rest as much as possible for 2 days, and I didn't. I tried. I had the all good intentions of, and it didn't work out. So, I was tested before it started in terms of me practicing the intention of just letting go, and what will be will be. It was out of my control, and so we started 7:30, which was much later than expected. And I just had to roll with it, because there was no changing that. I had to sleep enough. I really wanted to start early. I like starting really early because you get some Ks done when it's really cool and before sunrise. So you might knock out 15, 20 Ks. So I didn't get that. So the whole plan's out the window. But it was an amazing start. I had a huge amount of supporters there to start with me. And we got off to a really good start, but it was tough. Like the course is tough. It's 5.5 Ks of soft sand to start, which, wakes your quads up pretty quickly. And then from there, the course was really challenging. The elevation profile of the course is quite flat for 38 Ks. So it looks like I will breeze through almost a marathon. But we had some trail closures because of, some shallow flooding, but some little footbridges were down. We were bush bashing a bit because we couldn't find the trail. It was really marshy and mangrovey, and there'd been a lot of rain the day before, even though it had stopped. So it was super humid. And then we got out through the trail into the clearing and maybe 20 Ks in, and it was so hot. Like we were expecting rain and fairly cold weather, and that had just come sooner. So it was like early 30s, 100% humidity. And I just wasn't prepared for it, so I was losing a lot more water than expected. I wasn't eating as well because it's harder to eat when you're hot. It's also harder to eat when you're just a bit frazzled, trying not to be. So there's just a lot of emotion going on. I thought, we're just going to breeze through and get to the first checkpoint, 38 Ks down. I'm going to be feeling great. And I got in there and I was like, it's so hot. Like I need water. I'm going to need more food. My feet were blistered up already. I didn't get any blisters in UK, and I got, and I did switch shoes only 3 or 4 weeks out. I'd put a lot of Ks in them still, but probably just not the right shoe choice for the conditions, and maybe not for my feet. Anyway, I've learned that lesson. So, I had to blister pack up all my toes, which I've never really done before. They were pretty bad by that stage. I think having them wet for so long, for probably 4.5 hours in shoes that weren't really working, it took its toll early. So, I'm just getting tested really early, and it took a while for me to sit in the moment and go, this is actually perfect, because the sooner you do that in any challenge in life, for me anyway, as soon as I go, this is as it's supposed to be, embrace it, because then it becomes that is your superpower, like shifting that perspective and going, this is perfect. This is just what I wanted. Ultramarathon, it was going to hurt anyway. It was going to be hard anyway. Okay, I thought this might be a 120, 130K thing. It's 50K in. All right, let's have it, sort of thing. And it took me a while, but I flipped it. But then the next section was really tough. I set out with all good intentions of really focusing on my calories, but it just got hotter, and I was probably focused on trying to make up a bit of time. Sillily, was still slipping into that pacing goal thing, which you make mistakes out there. And I was too concerned on how much time I'd sat at the previous aid station to care for my feet and stuff, which it didn't matter at all, but in the moment it was mattering to me. So I was pushing a lot harder through the next section, and I missed a lot of eating cues again. I was really good with my hydration because it was hot. And so then I came into the next aid station for the first time ever that I can remember running or doing any endurance sport, cycling or anything, being really under calories. I didn't know what was happening. I felt really nauseous, quite dizzy. That section was about a hour 45 section, so it can turn pretty quick. I also realized that because I was at that aid station, although my feet weren't great, I was feeling physically pretty good. Like, it was harder section than inspected, but I was still feeling good. So came in there and I was really deflated. Like, there's a video of me just going, I don't know how this is so hard. Like, I was actually emotional. I'm like, I'm not sure how I'm going to get through this. I could see the looks on people's faces, people, it's hard for people to hide their expression. And there were a lot of worried faces, like looking at me in that chair. I was dry reaching, had to vomit. Because we're moving pretty well at that point. The heat got to me and I was under calories, and that's, I had a really good crew, a really experienced guy, Jace Cronshaw, who's run a lot of ultras, who was amazing. And he just sat me down. He said, mate, all you are is under calories. He broke it down and he made it really simple. He's like, it's just, you just need to get calories in, let's just break it down. And I'm like, well, how am I going to do that? And he's like, mate, I think you're just going to have to hike it out. I'm like, all right, let's get moving then, So we changed my shoes at that point. I'm like, these shoes aren't working. So we changed into an old pair of shoes, which was a godsend. Changed the kit, I was really sweaty, changed that, had some ice on my neck, all that sort of stuff. But couldn't really get calories in at the aid station. I was just, I ate an ice block. That was about it. Getting fluids in, but I was struggling.
And how were you, what was going through your mind at that moment? Was there ever even a flicker of a thought of I may not be able to do this, this may be sort of, the end before it's even started? Or were you always in that mindset of this is going to be hard and this is perfect? Or did you kind of ebb and flow between those?
No, it was way more than a flicker. I was like, I'm not going to make this. It was, and in the end, what I did, because it felt like, it's funny that the way my mental self-talk is now, I feel like I have a really good handle on it. So I sort of acknowledged it for what it was and said, you know what, that thought is fair. I'm going to let myself have that thought, because right now I'm dry reaching and I can't eat. So my day could be over. That's the reality. So I kind of, instead of trying to fight the thought, I let myself have it, because it was almost in a way evidence-based. I'm struggling. This sucks right now. And this is really hard because I've performed much better than this physically, before. Well, you know what I mean? I've never felt like this 55, 60K into a run before, ever, not even in 100. So, and And I think that was mainly down to the conditions. You know, UTA was kind of perfect running conditions. It was really cool. You didn't have to worry about hydration. It's much easier to eat when it's cool. Like I know you've run in the desert, so you would have experienced this. It's so hard to eat when you're hot.
Absolutely.
Like your stomach feels like it shrinks. You're like forcing food in. You're taking a bite of a Cliff Bar and washing it down with water, and you almost vomit it back up. Like it's like this weird thing. It just feels counterintuitive, and I think that comes with practice too. I've never really practiced that. I probably don't eat enough on my training runs. So there's a lot of lessons, which is great when you unpack it. But I had a huge low spot, and I wasn't, like people said, I still looked positive. So like they could see I was in my head, but I was still looking positive. I was still like, I never said out loud, I can't do this. I never said my day's done. I think when you put it out to the universe, it becomes something much bigger, but I just let myself have it internally. And then just got moving. I hiked for that next section with a new pacer. I hiked for the best part of 15 Ks. Wow. I hardly ran a step. Every time I got I wasn't watching my heart rate, but like just, I could feel every time I got into a jog, after about 2 or 3 minutes, the nausea and dizziness would spike and I'd feel like I was going to vomit. And it was obviously just like calorie deficit. That's just what I was telling myself. Anyway, it's what it felt like every time I asked my body to burn anything more than a walk. I felt really unwell. So, but the beauty of it was, I'd watched a lot of ultra running videos and I knew that it was a double-edged sword. I knew that a lot of runners don't get out of this. Like a lot of pro runners, when they start experiencing stomach issues, they drop because it's really hard to turn around. But at the same time, they're running 100%. Right. And I can see why, because as soon as I started trying to run a 5:45, 6-minute K, my body would be like, no, mate, like you're not doing that, So it was like 10, 11-minute Ks walking, which is hard, character building. But I just stayed super positive. Like Pat, my pacer, was awesome. Really good guy, not experienced in ultra running. His pacing duties was his longest ever run, which he didn't let me know at the time.
That's really cool.
He kept that under wraps. But he's a super fit guy. He's a really, he's a triathlete. And he was incredible. He was just like, he took his job very seriously in the sense that he was just looking after me and trying to get me to turn the corner. And we worked as a team, just tried all different foods. He stacked a whole different bunch of bars and gels. We had like baked potatoes, all sorts of different things. And it was the potatoes that actually stayed in. So I think that's probably a sign that whole foods is something I'm going to try and use more of in runs from here on. Although I was steering away from gels, I was trying to eat bars, and they are so hard to eat when it's hot and your mouth's dry. Absolutely. And they're dry. It's so hard.
Yeah, I've been there, and people don't realize, unless they've been in that situation, how absolutely ridiculous it is to have one bite of something like a Cliff Bar when you're really, really hot. It's just, it's too much effort. I feel like it burns more calories than what it's worth.
Yeah, it's just totally how
the way it feels.
Yeah, so I was like, I just couldn't even sort of get those sorts of things down at that point. It's still very hot. It's like probably early afternoon, peak heat of the day, and starting to get into some hilly terrain. So we're still making decent time because we're hiking. And I never stopped. I just kept moving consistently, stayed positive, kept my fluids up, and I had some liquid calories. So I was upping those a little bit. Really just wanted to turn my stomach around. And we got a couple of small little baked potatoes, like little white potatoes to stay down. And within a matter of minutes, I was like, my stomach came out of its knot. Like it felt like it was just knotted up, and like I just almost couldn't get anything in. Like it had just turned off. That's kind of how it felt. And anyway, and I just kept asking my body to work with me too. I was being really gentle with myself. I'm like, look, come on, like, I'm going to be kind. We'll walk until you're ready. But like, and this is the self-talk. It's like same sort of thing when I'm injured or I've got cramps. I'm like, okay, like I'll work with you here. And you start, I start having conversations with parts of my body. It sounds absolutely ridiculous.
No,
like
it's
they're a
powerful.
different entity to me, but
it
like it did, it worked, and Kept reminding myself how important this was to me. And this was, this is a long effort. And, I was leaning on my why and my purpose a lot, and all the things that I say around the similarities between the challenges of ultra running to my struggles with mental health and how hard it is some days to fight through the anxiety or the bouts of depression that I've experienced in my life. And knowing that I can sometimes wake up feeling really mentally drained and like on that spectrum, really I'm not feeling very well end. But if I just set some gentler intentions for the day and sit with it, I can actually get through that day, and it can actually turn out to be quite a good day, and you can have a really shit morning and a great afternoon. Like, it happens to everyone. So I took that approach and I kind of went, we're out here for a long time. You're only, I don't know how many hours I was in, maybe 8 or something. So I just sat with it and we were able to turn it around, which was incredible. I started to feel better probably at around the 70K mark. And and then we ran a really, really strong section into the final checkpoint, which was, not the final checkpoint, but that next main checkpoint. We ran most of that probably 10 or 12K. And I started to feel really strong. And it was kind of like, I felt like at that point, I just accepted it and said, well, this run wanted to test me really early. And it's a really big test getting tested early. It's hard because you're just not expecting it. You're always expecting an ultra to hurt late. And for whatever reason, that's what I got dished up. And I'm again grateful for it because it was very character building. Like, it was hard. I was scared. Like, I started thinking, what are people going to think of me? I've said I'm going to run to it. Like, all those thoughts that don't really matter, but they're there, like we all care what people think, like, as much as we don't want to. And, I'm starting to kind of doubt my own ability as a runner. Maybe ultra running isn't for me. Maybe the UTA 100 was an anomaly, and maybe this is actually my real self performance, So it does get negative, even for me who, I feel like over the last 5 years, I've done so much work on myself and, how I tackle problems and my self-talk and everything. But I still had a shocking low and had some pretty negative self-talk, but I just didn't let it stick. And yeah, like that aid station was then incredible, like coming in there just on sunset. We'd run through some beautiful countryside. We'd come sort of off the trail into some farmland, running through some sort of lush valleys. And Coach Cronshaw, so he's not my coach, but we call him Coach Cronshaw. He's a running coach. He was my head crew. He'd run up the mountain about 3K. So we came around this corner and he was there, and it was just like, oh, I'm feeling better. Like, it was like a celebration because I'd turned the corner, and because they didn't know, they had a GPS tracker, but it doesn't tell you much about, they could see, obviously I was moving quicker again, but so everyone was excited. The aid station was electric. Looked after my feet, did the whole works. I ate 2-minute noodles, and I was eating proper solid food. I felt like a new man, which was really cool. I had some nice moments there, hugged everyone, had some good chats, took my time, changed my entire kit again. It's just like in UTA, I don't think I changed my kit once, but I just felt like it was working. So I got into fresh kit for the night. Took a long sit there, like maybe an hour. By the time I got everything done, I was like, look, there's no rush. You turn the corner, get good calories in, eat like dinner, and try and make that like the warm up. 80 Ks is done. Try and go into this as fresh as possible. This is now the run. You're running 100 and whatever Ks, 120 Ks or something. Just playing mind games kind of thing, a little bit, breaking it down into smaller bite-sized chunks is everything. So I then had the night section with my good friend, Tom, who's an amazing ultra runner. And this was the section of the run. So it was the thing I was most worried about, running right through the night on trails I didn't know. I knew there was water crossings. It's pretty daunting. I'm sure you've experienced it, especially the first time. obviously I had my mate there with me, but he hadn't done much night running, although he's very experienced ultra runner. I knew we were cool, but I didn't have any of those thoughts when I left that aid station because I was just so amped that I'd been able to turn the corner. And it was just all positive. Yeah, we did all the, we did like 8 or 10 water crossings, and we were trying not to get our feet wet. So we took ages to like pick the right spot. We weren't rushing it. If it was a race, you just would have run straight through. And then we had a huge climb, like a 45-minute climb, about 700 meters of vert, thereabouts. So decent, like
it's decent.
Yeah, it was the first big decent climb, and we moved really well. And it was just like, I love it how Tom described it, because I haven't really spoken about this much yet. I'm still kind of processing everything that happened, which is kind of why it's cool to talk to you about it. But we had such an incredible section. He describes it as like we were almost one person. Like It was like flow state. It was bizarre. Like we were running, like I was running behind his feet. He could hear that my footsteps were with his. We just had a really good cadence going, really good flow. We were communicating, like navigating without even talking. Like we'd run up, we'd see a trailhead, and one of us would pull the map out and we'd have a quick look and we'd go this way. And I was trying to conserve energy while running really well. So we weren't doing heaps of talking. And yeah, I can't describe it in any other way other than like it was real flow state. It was epic. So we went from, it was about 7:45 p.m. till about 2:30 a.m. I don't know how many Ks we covered, but a lot, like a decent leg with about 1,200 meters of vert. So it was solid. It might have been, I think it was 215 Ks. So whatever that is, my maths is bad, but around 35 maybe. And it was essentially an uphill section, climb to about 1,000 meters, and then a steady descent. Like if you look at the elevation profile, it looks like we just went up and down. Obviously, there were some flat spots, but it was really nice to just tick over some good Ks. And we were running through this sort of flatter dirt country road section again, off the mountain, after having a short checkpoint. Jason and our other crew member, Nairi, came and met us. We had a stop just on the mountain, fairly quick one. I had a coffee, so first caffeine, which really is like rocket fuel for me because I don't have much caffeine. That was like, I wasn't feeling tired, but they're like, good time to have some caffeine. It was about 2 in the morning. And I couldn't believe how awake I was. And Tom was like, mate, he came into the aid station and I overheard him talk to the crew, how that happens. Like you sit down and then the crew get the download on how I'm actually going. And I heard him say, honestly, like, he's perfect. He's running amazing, and I heard him say that, which is good because it gave me a good little, okay, I'm in good shape here. We ran down, and then my parents, my fiance Sarah, had all driven up from Hawk's Nest. Mind you, this is like 2:30 in the morning. So they've driven an hour and a half to see me at this final spot that they can really see me, because then I go up into the high country and I'm gone until I finish. We had like a 3K road section to link the two trails. It's epic. We had our high-vis jackets on, but we had a car convoy just to keep us safe. So we're kind of running on the shoulder. And some really cool footage of me saying to the camera crew that I just wanted to stop briefly, but I really wanted to see Sarah. Which is awesome to just have on camera, because she knows that she's important. Although she knows, but it's on camera. I have evidence of saying I just want to see Sarah. But it's really special. I had some really moments with Sarah. She understands me better than anyone in the world, and she just reminded me of why I'm running. And trying not to get emotional, I'll hold it together. But she gave me a letter, like a note, a note that she'd written. She had it in a little plastic bag because she knew it'd get sweaty and wet. And we sat there and I read it with her. And it was just reminding me of my why and reminding me why I'm out there. She knew it was going to get tough. She knew I was going to have moments where I wanted to stop from here. And, it was her way of giving me a lot of love and showing me that it meant something to not just me, but everyone else, I was so special. And then off I went with Pacer D, who again is she's an amazing runner, very, very good runner. Like she's she's run faster at some of the ultras than I have. Like, not saying I'm an amazing runner, but she's strong, very strong. She's been running since she was young. She's from Ireland, and she grew up sort of running the marshy hills and stuff. She's anyway. So we're excited. She hadn't gone through the night before, but it was kind of like about 2:33 in the morning by this stage. And off we went. I started to feel cold, which was just, like just a little challenge, I guess. But I'm just kind of reminiscing now on how I was feeling. We ran through some farmland, and then we started our climbing. And the climbing was big. We started doing some pretty big climbs, just pinch after pinch. And we were again working really well together. I was pretty inward. Dee's real chatty, and she was like, "Oh, do you want me to stop talking?" I'm like, no, but I'm just kind of focused and, just focusing on my breathing. It was starting to really sink in that I was, 120 Ks into this effort, and I've been doing well, but I got a real long way to go. And it felt like I was starting to get to the business end, 80K to go. 80K is a long way on any day. But I was trying to keep it small, but also give the run respect. And so I had to kind of say to Dee, we're going to run these flats and downs a bit slower than I have been. I just think I should pull back a bit. I can feel my body starting to fatigue just a little bit. Like, when that fatigue sets in, that it's tiredness, like actual tiredness, not my legs are tired.
Right.
My body felt just, oof, I've been pushing for a while. And, I'm coming probably on 21, 22 hours.
Wow.
I think, or around that anyway. We celebrated me ticking over 126.7 Ks, because that was then my longest run ever, from last year's triple marathon. So that was a high five moment. And then not long after that, day broke. It was really special. Dee said, "Turn your head torch off. Let's go by the daybreak light." It was, you had to let your eyes adjust, but it was really special. So we're running in light that you probably wouldn't run with that head torch, but it was fire trail, pretty runnable. That was pretty special. And I guess just changing it up too was nice, putting the head torch away. And then we got a beautiful sunrise. The sky lit up. I took time to soak it all up, take some photos. We got some videos, and and then we pressed on up to 135 Ks. We saw Jace and Nairi again. This is a really interesting checkpoint, actually, because I was feeling tired but pretty good, and they asked me to try and sleep there. And I was really surprised by that, but I was in their hands. I wasn't expecting it. And I tried, and I think the point was I was trying to sleep, and that wasn't going to happen. Like willing myself to sleep. So I kept sticking, they had me down on a sleeping mat, and I kept sticking my head up going, "This is ridiculous. I can't sleep. It's ridiculous." But I ended up resting for a good while, like again, like a pretty long time there. I think probably 40 minutes, 45 minutes. And I'm just not thinking about the elapsed time. I don't care. Even in races that of this length, people take time. It was 23 hours in at this point. So it was quite a while, and I'd been up longer, of course, because I'd got up a few hours before we started. So I'd been awake for over 24 hours and moving for, best part of 23. So it's a long time. So I was trying to sleep, it wasn't working. And so they just, they know I meditate and do breath work and stuff. They're all pretty cool. So they're like, just try a bit of that. So I did a bit of that, calmed my sort of frustration, I guess. I was just comfortable, really, like my legs were sore. So, and I'm a back sleeper, but I didn't feel that comfortable. So I wanted to kind of sleep on my side. Anyway, it was weird. I couldn't quite work it out. And I think it was just, I was too awake. So at that checkpoint, again, I ate quite a bit of warm food. Like they had the little camping stove. So these comforts are so powerful. Like, I had a miso soup or whatever it was, like some sort of like yummy Asian style soup that just was so salty and tasted amazing. And, and I think some more noodles, Anyway, I got in some reasonable calories. And by this point, I'd experienced for the first time that your palate just going off sweet. I tried to have a muesli bar, and I was eating fine by like at this point, coming into that checkpoint. And I was just like, oh, sweet, yuck, and it just, I've heard this happens to some people where your mouth just gets sick of sweet stuff. And so that was interesting. So I was like, okay, I've kind of didn't want to think about having any gels, which meant that gels probably weren't going to work. And I was planning on using them later in the effort when I wasn't feeling like eating. So again, like things not going as you might expect them to go. But we got up and moving. It was cold. I had my thermal and my windbreaker on by that point because we're on the other side of the mountain, out of the rising sun. So we're in the shadows in the mountain. You know what that's like. In the shadows of the morning mountain with the wind coming through, we were probably at 10 or 1100 meters above sea. So like it's getting pretty high. It's probably a bit higher than Blue Mountains, I think. So we're getting that alpine air anyway, which was great, but cold. And we just sort of pressed on from there. Dee and I moved really well at the time. I was, again, not too much. And there's some video footage of me looking. I'm looking probably worse than I thought I was. Like I was looking pretty out of it. Like I thought I was just in the zone, but I kind of look a bit, you look a bit like
a little out of the zone,
like you might fall asleep standing out. Anyway, we punched on. That section was a huge amount of climbing. Like in 24 Ks, we did about 1,500 meters, I think, or 1,200 meters. There were some steep sections. We also missed a turn. So we didn't take a wrong turn. We missed one, which is kind of, it's the same thing in the end, but we just kept running on what we thought was the main trail, and we didn't notice for nearly 5 Ks, which is really hard mentally. I was begging for the aid station to come. I just wanted another checkpoint to see the guys and sit down and recalibrate before the final 40 Ks. And it just was never ending because we added 5 Ks onto that leg. It was really hard mentally. Dee was really with herself because she felt like she got me lost, and we had to work through that. Obviously we were both very capable of navigating. Neither of us checked the map. It was nobody's fault. Anyway, we're also having some issues with the sat phone communication. So some of the messages weren't coming through, which was a little bit concerning too, just in terms of that safety element. Anyway, I communicated with the crew that we were way off course, but we'd worked it out and we were finding our way back. We didn't want to double back because that would have been even more. So we worked out we could take a different trail. And that meant going right down to the valley, do a river crossing and come back out. So it was a hard decision because it added more vert. But we did that. And we moved pretty well. We had some fun. We got some good photos. I told her to cheer up. And and then we ended up finally meeting the crew. It was supposed to be 155. It was 62K, which, as you'll hear in a second, is kind of a cool little blessing that we added those Ks just because of the milestone of the distance. So I came to the aid station hurting and very tired, but expecting to keep going. I sat down there, and the more the minutes went by, I started to feel more and more content, and started missing my family more and more, and started feeling like maybe I'd done enough. I said to Jace, I'm not sure if my legs have another 2,000 meters of vert and 45 Ks in them. And he said, mate, just sit on it, and then we spoke about it, and I told him how I was feeling. And I said to him, so this final section, just for context, there's no aid. So it's the longest section of the entire run. It's also the steepest and most remote.
Wow.
Silly me, choosing a route that gets harder and harder and more remote as you go. I did it for a reason. And again, I've learned my lesson there. Like, without it being a race with a mountaintop aid station, like you don't want to be running an 8-hour section at the end of a 200 race run. You just it's scary. I was going into the second night. The only way, there's no 4-wheel drive access because you're up on the ridge line. The only way it's helicopter or foot. And started, this is what we were talking through. And I started losing confidence by the second in my ability to see it through safely. And I started, and then feeling like I'd done enough felt more and more real. And yeah, look, this was like a 20-minute conversation. Like the watch is still ticking, and you know, and then Jace kind of looked at me and he pulled me up for a hug. I'll try not to get emotional, and he just said like, I think we're done, you know. And it was really hard to leave it on the table. It was really hard because I jogged into that aid station. I thought to stop, but this is beautiful, right? Because I thought to stop, I would have torn my calf or been crawling into the aid station, you know, because I'm like, that's who I am. Like, I'm a man. I'm like, that was in there. And it was really powerful for me to make a really mature, adult, human decision without that toxic masculinity piece that drives me, that egoic piece that drives me a lot of the time still, even though I've done a lot of work on it. And then I can hand on heart say that this wasn't about me. It wasn't about ego. It was about the cause. And I lived that. If I'd pushed through and hiked for 8 or 10 hours and put my family through that stress, I don't know that I would have felt good about that at the end, because I would have known that I said to Jace, the only reason why I want to continue here is because I want to tell people that I ran 2:05.
Right.
And that's not enough, you know, and I had the perspective to see that. And I'm grateful that I was still making a lot of sense, I felt, you know, and it was the right decision. You know, it wasn't the day for it. And like I just referenced before, because of the add-on, with the extra Ks, with D and I, you know, getting lost, it meant that I'd actually run 100 miles.
Wow.
Which is amazing, because like that's like a, you know, just a pinnacle distance of ultra racing.
It really is.
It's, I think, 161 kilometers, and my GPS says 162. And if we hadn't got lost, we would have come in there around 155, 156. So it's just nice to have that. It was a little bit of icing on the cake for me, just to go, well, I've run 100 miles now, which is cool. Kind of took the edge off, you know, just a little bit of anguish of leaving it on the table. But I know it was the right decision, and I wouldn't change it. You know, everything was as it was supposed to be, and I think that this, you know, that needing to match with that, that decision at that time, and the way that we navigated it as a team, and we stuck by the real purpose of this run. You know, I think it's a really beautiful lesson to share with people, you know, and to show men, but you don't necessarily need to finish what you start and bury yourself in the process. You know, the likelihood of me needing to sleep out there overnight because I started hallucinating, like, as you know, you start hallucinating. Night number 2, most people have massive hallucinations. It's very easy to get lost. I'm on a trail I don't know. I'm in the dark for the last 4 or 5 hours of the effort. It really, if you write it down, it makes no sense. And I had to think, although ultra running in a lot of ways doesn't make a lot of sense, like, it's a pretty wild sport. I think up until that point, it had all worked out really well, and it wasn't worth pushing past that. And at the end of the day, it was really a decision based on safety, but also not just about me. Like, you know, my crew would have been worrying about me for 8 hours. So would have my family. You know, and it just, so like, that's the story of the run, and, you know, all its lessons. And there, you know, I'm still processing it, so there's going to be a lot more to come. But like, I hope that people enjoy hearing, you know, what it's like to run 162 kilometers through the mountains on your first time as well, you know. So that was 29 hours. My longest previous run was 14 hours on my feet.
Wow.
So, you know, huge step up in distance and elapsed time on feet. Yeah, so, you know, all the milestones, running through the night for the first time and everything that went with it. But, you know, it was all about the shared experience, you know, sharing it with paces, sharing it with my crews, sharing it with my family and my community, sharing it via social media. Although I wasn't driving it, Sarah had my login, and she was, and, you know, the amount of engagement on my social media, the amount of messages, it was incredible, like hundreds and hundreds. Like, I don't have a huge following on social media or anything, but just so many people were excited about following along for all of their own reasons, of which there are many. And I feel like we won. I feel like the whole project was a major success. I don't feel my relationship with the word failure is very different now anyway, because I was so used to be so hard on myself for failing, but I don't even categorize that run as a failure. Like I just stopped somewhere different to where I thought I was going to. That's kind of how I feel. And I'll go back and run that final section, maybe in a month or two, just because I've never run that section and I know it's beautiful up on the ridgeline. But yeah, like that's the story. There's a lot of lessons, and I'll keep unpacking it for a few weeks and months to come, I'm sure.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing, Dan. And, that defining lesson around, quote unquote, toxic masculinity and the ability for you to recognize, so far into a run, to have that clarity that, this isn't what the run is about. The run, is not about my ego or finishing or, this concept of, failing. It's about the awareness. And as you said, like before you even put your first step on the starting line, you'd already achieved so much of what this true goal is. And I just think it's so beautiful for you to be able to, go on your own journey in this experience and for all of us to learn from it. And I certainly just, I feel like from everything that you've shared, I certainly have stuff to unpack as well. And I'm truly grateful for it. It's just, they're profound lessons through experiences like this. And, I know in part one of our conversation, this is what we're speaking about is, just in being able to set those big goals and learn so much through them. And, I love the saying, it's so corny, but it's like shoot for the moon and fall amongst the stars. And I always think that there's something so powerful in going for a goal that's bigger than what you've ever achieved. And I think personally that it's truly heroic, and your sense of contribution that comes with doing these things is just so unbelievably powerful. And yeah, I truly honor you, Dan. I really do. And I have so much reverence for you, and I just think you're such an amazing person. And personally, I'm just so grateful to have connected with you. And, I'm excited. I'm excited for you to continue, reflecting. And I think even you going back to the part that remains unfinished, I know you enough to know that that's going to be really sentimental for you, and that's going to be a really powerful experience in itself that I hope you share with us, because I know there's more than me that's truly, listening out for these reflections and lessons that you continue to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on to share, and to really unpack it for the first time, which is cool. It's been a really cathartic experience sharing with you. So thank you. And I will definitely keep you posted on that final section when it happens. I've already chatted to, all the pacers and my crew. I'm going to try and have it be a little reunion. I think that'd be really nice. But yeah, when I'm ready, no rush. But it's just going to enjoy. Yeah, just going to enjoy the lead into Christmas now and spend quality time with my family and friends, and try not to think about running too much. Although I will just go out for occasional jogs and things, just not running training. And just enjoy a slower paced life without a training program, which I'm sure you can relate to. Just running just for the enjoyment with no goal in mind is nice sometimes. But yeah, thank you, Jennah. It's been an honor to chat with you, and hopefully your listeners enjoy the chat and can let us know what they think.
They absolutely will. And as you're aware, Dan, I would love to ask you on a final note, what does it mean to you to be human?
Oh my goodness. After all that, I forgot that this question was coming. You know what? I'm just going to be completely honest and tell people that this question kind of made me feel anxious. Because I knew it was coming, and I don't normally prepare what I'm going to say. And I was like, can't really prepare an answer to that. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the question is so big for me. And what it is to be human is one of those things that I feel and can't really articulate. It's really hard for me to find the words, and I feel like if I try, I'm not copying out of the question, but if I try, I really won't do the feeling justice, because what I feel about being human doesn't really have words. But right now, what it means to be human for me in this moment is to connect with people with love.
Beautiful.
Getting emotional. I don't know why, but
It's
I just I just live with my heart, and I believe that that's what we're here for. You know, I just believe that the things in the world that aren't ideal wouldn't exist if everyone lived through their heart.